next business. Question for short debate on the strength of parliamentary democracy in the United Kingdom. Baroness Jones of Moulscombe.
My Lords, I was so delighted to see so many noble Lords keen to talk about parliamentary democracy. I think that's absolutely wonderful. And I hope that I won't shock them too much when I say that we don't really have one. We don't really have democracy anymore in this country. I'd also like to extend a welcome to the Right Reverend Prelate, the Bishop of Lichfield, whom I think I met in a former existence, and it's good to see him here. And I do hope he's got more than 2 minutes to make his maiden speech. Now, I'm going to argue that we have a failing democracy, and it's exemplified by an executive that is taking on the powers of Parliament to make, delete or even change laws. It's a power grab that will undoubtedly backfire when Labour takes government. And at the moment, we are actually seeing a bill go through. We're going to be debating it tomorrow, the Strikes Bill, at report stage. It's hyper-skeletal, giving quite sweeping powers to the minister. And I find that quite shocking. In 1929, Lord Hewitt, the Lord Chief Justice, warned then of the executive taking on oppressive power through the use of delegated legislation to subordinate Parliament, to evade the courts, and to render the will or caprice of the executive unfettered and supreme. And then a few years later, we saw what that led to in 1930s Germany, as a party gained power in an election, then destroyed all the democratic and social institutions that held it in check. We saw a ruling party, a populist party, stir up hatred of foreigners and minorities in a cynical attempt, and successful attempt, to gain and keep power by fomenting divisions. A security expert recently highlighted the blacklisting from government events by the Leader of the House, Jacob Rees-Mogg MP, of any experts on any subject if they were critical of the government. Now, this country has proud traditions, wonderful traditions of freedom and fairness. But I'm afraid Gary Lineker is, as he so often is right, and that we're actually on a downward track on those. Now, the local elections are important for local democracy, but this time around they're absolutely vital for our national democracy as well. They give electors a chance to warn a corrupt, far-right government that it has gone too far, and that the democratic will to assert itself, or the undemocratic will to assert itself, is actually a disaster for Britain. The same government is using voter ID to suppress the vote, with older people, like us, able to use our rail card as ID, but not younger people. If there's chaos at the local elections, with thousands of voters turned away or long queues putting others off from voting, then that will make many question the validity of the results. And such voter suppression is quite common in America. It's definitely an import from there. It's used regularly to gerrymander results by those in power who want to stay in power forever. If there's chaos, delays or dips in turnout at these local elections, then the government has two choices. They can be honourable and abandon voter ID before the general election, or they can risk destroying what is left of our democratic system. And I won't let Labour off the hook when they become the government either. We need proportional representation. We need an elected second chamber, and we need to stop money controlling government policy as it does at the moment. Yeah. The Australians realise that to save their democracy, they need an anti-corruption commission, and we should do exactly the same. So, for example, the PPE fast-track contracts, investigate. The millions of pounds in donations from the fossil fuel industry, investigate. The ministerial meetings with United States healthcare providers, investigate. I haven't actually got time to list all the scandals, the dodgy deals, and the Tufton Street connections that would be the bread and butter of any corruption commission. It would take years to go through all this, and offenders will ultimately, I hope, go to prison. But it might make MPs think more about their constituents and less about their bank accounts. Proportional representation could be the foundation of a renewed democracy. It's what the public support in opinion polls, and it's what Labour membership support at their conference. And please don't talk any nonsense about first past the post leading to strong and stable government. That is absolutely nonsense. You know, 3 prime ministers in the last 3 years. And the problem is we've had 14 years of the same party in government, and that has created an environment, a climate where corruption and sleaze are rife. There's no stability or strength when a ruling party with a massive majority has a permanent crisis of allegations involving bullying, sex scandals, cash for questions, PPE contracts and the drawn-out saga of Partygate. We now have high interest rates, high food prices and high energy prices, and the only thing that isn't going up is wages. I agree with my Labour colleagues that any democracy that works will punish such failure and result in a change of government at the next election. But I would also argue that no healthy democracy would have allowed this messy mix of incompetence and far-right ideology to have dragged us into such an economic and moral sewer. No healthy democracy would allow the privatised water companies to give shareholders £52 billion over recent decades, while allowing sewage to be pumped into our rivers and coastal waters on an industrial scale. And of course, only today, only this afternoon, the other place has voted again to actually allow that to continue. No healthy democracy would allow billions in fraud to be written off with a shrug of the shoulders, which is basically what's happened here. And no healthy democracy would allow 13 years of food banks and child poverty becoming normal, while the number of billionaires has more than trebled. A change of party in a failing democracy won't do what we hope it would do, and I don't want to ever live through another period of double austerity, social division and environmental damage. Now, I do not claim for one moment that proportional representation is the solution to all our problems, but it might at least allow those solutions to emerge. Now, finally, I will just run through what I see as the real problems with our democracy at the moment. A democracy is failing when those who support the opposition are discouraged from voting, protests that are noisy and get noticed get banned, strikes are also banned, police spies have legal immunity when infiltrating campaign groups, the people who oversee the running of elections lose their independence, disregard of international law and treaty commitments, the dilution of human rights protections and the ability of courts to question executives' decisions. Lawyers and judges are declared the enemy within. Corruption is rife and legitimised. There's one rule for those partying at the top and another rule for us at the bottom. And money buys access, and access gets you the contracts, licences and regulations you desire. The national broadcaster is run by friends of the ruling party, and the independent media is mostly owned by foreign billionaires. This is not a democracy. This is not a country that we can be proud of anymore. Our traditions have been scrapped, and this government is responsible for that. And so I would argue that the strength of parliamentary democracy in the UK at the moment is absolutely zero. And I do find it offensive when noble lords opposite sit and chat when I'm speaking. I think it's unnecessary to actually, giggle from the back seats when you're disagreeing with me. Stand up, be brave, and stand up and say something in the debate.
Hear, hear.